It was a quiet evening at home. The aroma of my mother's cooking filled the house, and the clinking of plates and silverware echoed in the dining room. I sat at the table with my parents, trying to enjoy the warmth of the moment, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Everything seemed normal. My father was reading the newspaper. My mother was humming softly as she placed the food on the table. And I, just like any other day, was lost in my thoughts. The house had always been a place of comfort, where I could feel safe, where the love of my parents seemed to surround me, or so I thought. I had always taken that warmth for granted, believing that no matter what happened in life, my parents would always be there for me. They had raised me, guided me, and I had tried to be the perfect child in return, but tonight felt different. There was something about the atmosphere that I couldn't quite place. My mother was humming a bit too loudly, almost as if she were trying to mask something, and my father kept glancing up from his newspaper, only to quickly look away when our eyes met. A sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Still, I pushed the feeling aside. I didn't want to ruin dinner with my own insecurities. We always sat down for dinner at the same time, all three of us, no matter what. It was a tradition in our home, one that I cherished throughout my life. We would sit, share a meal, and talk about a day nothing too deep, just simple chatter about what happened at work, how school was going, or plans for the upcoming weekend. It was our little ritual, our moment of connection, but that night, the usual topics of conversation never came up. Instead, my father's gaze shifted again, and he placed the newspaper down slowly. For a brief moment, his eyes met mine, but there was no warmth in them, no trace of the familiarity I had grown so accustomed to. His face was devoid of expression, as if he were preparing himself for something he didn't want to say. My mother, still humming, placed the final dish on the table. Then she too, very deliberately, took her seat. Her movements were slow, measured, almost stiff. It was as if there was an invisible barrier between us that hadn't been there before. I was beginning to feel the pressure of the silence that hung between us. "That's it then?" I asked, trying to break the tension, my voice light and teasing. "No talk about the news today. How was work?" My father didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached across the table and slid an envelope toward me. I felt the weight of it before I even touched it, and as my eyes met his, I noticed the hard, unreadable expression on his face. "What's this?" I asked, my voice faltering slightly as my heart skipped a beat. "Just open it," he said in a tone that was colder than I'd ever heard before. My mother didn't say a word. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, avoiding my gaze. The tension was unbearable now, and my mind raced with questions. What could possibly be so important? My hand shook as I reached for the envelope. It was smooth, almost sterile, and its presentation too perfect. The weight of it in my hands felt almost symbolic, as if it held the power to change everything. I tore open the envelope slowly, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. As I pulled out the piece of paper, the first word I saw struck me like a slap to the face. Disownment. I blinked, thinking I must have read it wrong. But as I looked closer, the words became clearer, sharper. My eyes darted across the page, and it hit me like a wave. They were serious. They had decided to sever ties with me, to erase me from their lives, and they had put it in writing. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, my head spinning, and I felt a tightness in my chest that threatened to suffocate me. The words on the page seemed to mock me, telling me that everything I had done to please them, everything I had sacrificed, wasn't enough. They had laid it all out: disappointments, unmet expectations, and my refusal to conform to the life they had planned for me. They couldn't stand me any longer. I looked up, trying to make sense of it, but my parents wouldn't meet my eyes. My father was staring at the table, his lips pressed together, his jaw clenched. My mother's face was pale and her hands trembled slightly in her lap. There was no apology in their eyes, no hint of regret. There was only ... distance. I felt my heart shatter as I absorbed the full weight of what they were telling me. My own flesh and blood had decided I was no longer worth their time, their love. The realization hit me like a freight train. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice breaking as I stared at the papers in my hands. "You're really going to do this?" My mother's eyes were wide, filled with something I couldn't quite read: fear, perhaps, or regret. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was as if the truth was too painful to say aloud. "Just sign it," my father said, in a voice that was strangely detached. "It's for your own good. We've given you everything. We've sacrificed everything for you, and you've only brought us shame. We can't keep supporting this anymore. We can't keep enabling you." I could hear the coldness in his words, the finality in his tone. The years of love and care they had given me, had they all been a lie? Were they really just waiting for me to disappoint them, waiting for me to fall short? My mind raced with thoughts I couldn't contain. Every moment, every memory we had shared together now felt tainted, twisted. I stood up suddenly, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. The papers were still clutched tightly in my hands, but the world around me seemed to be moving in slow motion. How can you just throw me away like this?" I choked out, my voice rising with each word. "I'm your child. I've done everything you asked of me. Everything. How can you just throw me out of your life?" My mother stood up too, her face pale and drawn. She reached out as if to stop me, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me, not now. Not when they had made it so clear that I meant nothing to them anymore. "This is not how things were supposed to go," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I've given up so much to make you proud, to make you happy. And this is how you repay me." My father didn't respond, and my mother was silent. The silence between us grew louder, deafening in its intensity. My whole world was crumbling around me, and I was powerless to stop it. My chest tightened as I read the disownment letter again, my mind trying to make sense of the words. But there was no sense to it. No logic, no understanding. Only cold, heartless rejection. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt alone. "I'm done," I whispered, almost to myself. "I'm done trying to be what you want. If this is how you feel about me, then I'll make it on my own." I turned and walked out of the room, my hands trembling. The door slammed behind me, and for a moment I just stood there in the hallway, trying to catch my breath. The pain of their rejection was unbearable, but in that pain, I could feel something else, something that terrified me but also empowered me. It was the realization that I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed them to define my worth. With shaking hands, I held the envelope close to my chest, feeling the sharp edges dig into my skin. I had no idea what was coming next, but in that moment, I made a decision. I would no longer be the person they wanted me to be. I would carve my own path, and I would prove them wrong. I didn't need them to survive. I didn't need them to succeed. They had handed me the papers, but I wasn't going to let them have the last word. The days after I left the house were a blur. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was walking through a storm, each gust of wind threatening to knock me off my feet. The pain of being disowned by my parents was something I couldn't escape. It wasn't just the rejection that stung, it was the years of emotional investment, the trust that had been shattered in a single, heartless moment. I walked aimlessly, not knowing where I was headed. The world around me seemed distant, almost unrecognizable. The streets, once familiar, now felt foreign, as if I were a stranger in my own life. My heart ached with every step, and my mind raced, with a mixture of anger, confusion, and sorrow. But despite the turmoil inside me, a strange sense of clarity began to form. In the quiet moments of my solitude, I began to understand something that had been elusive for years. I had been living my life for them, trying to meet their expectations, trying to be the person they wanted me to be. I had spent my entire life seeking their approval, constantly feeling like I was never enough. And now, in the most painful way possible, they had made it clear that nothing I did could ever satisfy them. As I walked through the city, I found myself in front of a small park. The sound of children laughing and playing in the distance seemed to bring a momentary peace to my troubled mind. I sat on a bench, trying to process everything that had happened. The anger I felt toward my parents was still there, sharp and raw, but beneath it, there was something else, something deeper. I had never allowed myself to truly think about my own desires, my own dreams. I had always been so focused on their expectations, so determined to make them proud. But now their rejection had forced me to confront something I had been avoiding. For so long, my own identity. Who was I? Beyond their definition of me. What did I truly want in life? The realization hit me like a wave. I had spent so many years trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. My parents had always pushed me to follow a specific path, one that didn't align with who I was or what I wanted. They had built a vision for my life, one that left no room for my own ambitions, my own passions. I had tried to appease them, to mold myself into the person they thought I should be, but it was never enough. No matter how hard I tried, I always felt like I was falling short. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the realization wash over me. This was my chance. The rejection wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It was a painful but necessary catalyst for my transformation. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need their approval. It wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, doubts, and fears. But for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of freedom. I had been given an opportunity to break free from their grip and live my life on my own terms. That night, I returned to the small apartment I had rented. The space was sparse, just a few pieces of furniture and the bare essentials. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I stood in the middle of the room, looking around at the walls that seemed to close in on me. I had always felt like I was living under their shadow, never fully stepping into my own light. But now, everything was different. I sat at the small desk by the window and opened my laptop. The harsh glow of the screen felt strangely comforting, a reminder that I was still in control of my own future. I opened a blank document and began to write. For the first time in my life, I wrote without holding back. I wrote about my dreams, my goals, and my vision for the future. I wrote about the person I wanted to become, not the person they had tried to shape me into. I wrote about the freedom I was beginning to feel, even in the midst of my pain. It was liberating. I realized that I'd been so consumed with pleasing them, with trying to live up to their expectations, that I'd forgotten what it meant to truly live for myself. The disownment papers they had handed me were no longer a symbol of rejection. They had become a reminder of my strength, of my ability to rise above their judgment and take control of my own destiny. The next few days were filled with an overwhelming sense of purpose. I threw myself into work, determined to make something of myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I didn't have their financial support anymore, and I had no safety net to fall back on. But in some strange way, that made me feel more alive than ever. There was no one to lean on but myself. No one to hold me back. I started small. I took on freelance projects, slowly building a portfolio of work. I reached out to people in my network, asking for opportunities, for advice, for support. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but I was determined to make it work. I had to prove to myself and to them that I was capable of achieving my goals, even without their approval. As the weeks went by, I began to gain momentum. My projects grew more significant, and my name started to get recognized in the industry. Slowly but surely, I was building the life I'd always dreamed of, the life that had been impossible when I was under their control. But as my success grew, so did the pressure. I knew my parents were watching from the sidelines. They had heard about my achievements, and the whispers of my success had reached them. I could almost feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to fail. I knew they expected me to come crawling back, to beg for their forgiveness, to admit that I needed them. But I wasn't going to do that, not anymore. One day, as I was wrapping up a meeting with a potential client, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw that it was an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a familiar voice, my mother's voice, spoke softly, almost hesitantly. Is this your name? Yeah, speaking. Her voice faltered and I could hear the tremor of emotion in her words. We need to talk. Please, come home, we're sorry. Your father and we've been thinking about what we did, and we regret it. We want you to come back, please. The words hung in the air, and for a moment I was frozen. My heart raced, and I felt a rush of emotions flood through me. They were asking for forgiveness. They were admitting they had been wrong. But was it enough? Could I just forgive them and return to the life they had planned for me? No, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm not coming back, not yet. You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to go back to the way it was. You'll have to do more than that. You'll have to show me that you truly understand what you did. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my mother's shaky breath. She had never expected this from me. She had never thought that I would have the strength to stand up to her, but I did. I can't just forget everything that happened, I continued, my voice unwavering. You can't just erase what you did to me. I need more than an apology. I need to see that you really understand. I need to see that you respect me as I am not as the person you wanted me to be. Her voice cracked as she replied, We'll do whatever it takes, please, just come home. But I wasn't ready, not yet. Not until I knew that I could stand on my own, truly free from their expectations. As I ended the call, a sense of peace washed over me. I had taken control of my life, and no matter how much they regretted their decision, I wasn't going to let them dictate my future anymore. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was free. I had learned to rely on myself, to trust my own abilities, and to chase my dreams without fear. And now, it was their turn to beg. The weeks after that phone call seemed to drag on endlessly. Despite my parents' apology, despite their plea for me to come home, I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same. The relationship we once shared had been shattered irreparably, fractured by their disownment of me. What they failed to understand, or perhaps failed to accept, was that I had already begun to build something for myself, something stronger than the bond they had tried to impose on me. I'd begun to thrive in ways I had never thought possible. As the days passed, I felt a sense of liberation that grew with each new project I took on. I wasn't just building my career. I was building my identity, my life, piece by piece. And with each success, I could feel the sting of their rejection, fading, replaced by something stronger. Confidence. It wasn't easy, though. There were nights when doubt crept in, moments when I questioned whether I had made the right decision. I missed the comfort of my family's presence, the ease of their love, or at least the love I had believed was unconditional. But even on those nights, when loneliness threatened to consume me, I reminded myself of the power I had gained in choosing my own path. I wasn't alone. I had myself. And that was more than enough. One day, a phone call broke the stillness of my routine. It was a call I had been both dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The name on the caller ID sent a jolt through me. It was my father. For a moment, I froze. I hadn't heard from him since the disownment. His voice on the phone would bring everything back, the pain, the anger, the disappointment. But I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. This was part of the journey, the inevitable consequence of standing up for myself. I had made my choice, and now I had to face whatever came next. I took a deep breath and answered the call. Hello? I said, my voice calm, but tinged with an edge I hadn't intended. There was a long pause before his voice came through, low and hesitant. Your name? It's your father. My heart thudded in my chest, but I held myself steady. I wasn't the same person who had walked out on them months ago. I wasn't the same person who had begged for their approval. I know you're probably upset with me, he continued, but I need you to listen. Your mother and we've been talking a lot about what happened. And I'll be honest with you, we regret it. We were wrong. We should never have done what we did. We want to make it right. We want you back in our lives. His words seemed rehearsed, the apology too neatly packaged. He wasn't speaking from the heart. He was speaking from a place of guilt, of regret that hadn't yet been fully processed. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear this. In fact, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it at all. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to the way it was. I replied, my voice firm, unwavering. You can't erase what you did to me. It's not that simple. You took everything. From me, the love I thought we shared, the bond I thought we had. You can't undo that. I could feel the tension on the other end of the line, his discomfort palpable. But I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I understand, he said slowly. But please, just listen. We're willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. We'll support you. We'll help you. Just please come back home. We want to be a family again. His words hung in the air like a promise, but I wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. The road to reconciliation wasn't just about accepting their apology. It was about them showing me that they understood the depth of their betrayal, that they recognized the harm they had caused. I couldn't go back to them on the terms they had set out for me. You don't get it, I said, my voice shaking slightly with the weight of my emotions. You can't just say, I'm sorry, and expect me to come running back. You need to show me that you've changed. You need to prove to me that you truly see me for who I am now, not who you wanted me to be. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear his heavy breathing, the sound of him trying to gather his thoughts, to find the right words. But I wasn't sure there were any words that could fix this, not yet. Not until they truly understood the magnitude of what they had done. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted. I just ... I want you back in my life, your name. I'm not ready to forgive you, I replied, the words coming out more slowly than I intended. I need time. You've taken so much from me, and I need to rebuild myself before I can even think about going back. The silence on the line was deafening. I could hear the sorrow in his voice, the realization that his attempt to undo the damage wasn't going to be as simple as a few words, but that was the point. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a phone call, a few simple sentences. The bond we had was broken, and it would take more than words to repair it. I'll be here, he said softly, his voice tinged with sadness. Whenever you're ready. I ended the call shortly after that, not knowing what to feel. Part of me wanted to run back into their arms, to fall into the familiar safety of their love. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger in the face of rejection, knew that I couldn't let myself fall into the same trap. They had shown me who they were, and now it was time for me to show them who I had become. Over the next few days, I received several more calls from them. My mother left voicemails, my father sent text messages, all pleading for me to come home, but I resisted. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to fall back into line, to forgive them, and return to the life they had planned for me. They didn't want to face the reality of what they had done. They just wanted the comfort of their old family back. But that wasn't going to happen. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to see that they truly understood. I needed them to recognize that I had changed, that I wasn't the same person who had walked out on them. They had to see that I had grown, that I was capable of building my own life, my own future. And so, I kept working. I kept building. Slowly but surely, my career took off. I gained more clients, more recognition. I poured myself into my work, not as a way to prove anything to my parents, but as a way to prove something to myself. I wasn't the helpless child they had tried to mold me into. I was strong. I was capable. And I was going to succeed with or without their approval. But as time went on, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer I could keep this distance between us. The pain of being disowned still lingered, still burned, but it was no longer a raw wound. It had scarred over, leaving behind something stronger. And yet the longing for some kind of resolution, some kind of peace, gnawed at me. Then, one day I received a letter. The envelope was simple, just a plain white piece of paper, with my name on it. I opened it cautiously, not knowing what to expect. As I read the words on the page, I could feel a lump forming in my throat. It was from my mother. In the letter, she apologized again, this time with more sincerity. She acknowledged the pain they had caused me, the hurt they had inflicted. She expressed regret for the way they had handled things, for the way they had pushed me away instead of supporting me. But more than that, she expressed a deep desire to understand me, to truly see me for who I had become. She wrote that she was proud of me, proud of the person I had become despite everything. And then, at the end of the letter, there was something that caught my eye. A simple sentence that felt like a lifeline. We're here whenever you're ready. It wasn't an offer to erase the past. It wasn't a plea to go back to the way things were. It was an acknowledgement that I had changed. That I had a life of my own now, and that they had to respect that. It wasn't the perfect apology, but it was a start. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel something that had been buried deep within me. Hoped it wasn't going to be easy. And I wasn't ready to forgive them completely, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward, one that didn't require me to erase everything I'd worked for, everything I had become. And so I took a deep breath and began to make my way toward reconciliation, one small step at a time.